A captive audience. I'm Kevin Horn. I'm here with David Darnell on the 30th of January. Uh, and there's been some interesting news today. How you doing, David?
Well, January has been a long year so far.
Yeah. Yeah, it's already super long. And when I look at the plethora of news stories, it's almost as if nobody seems to know that Joe Biden is in total collapse. I literally have seen half a dozen things just from this week where he's speaking to people at an event or at the White House or making comments, and they're incoherent. He doesn't make any sense. And it's even getting hard for the news people like CNN and MSLSD and all that to report what he's saying, because they literally if they report what he's saying, they have to add the Biden to English translation from cognitively impaired gibberish to English. And
Yeah.
he gets people's names wrong all the time. It's literally like he's circling the drain, and which makes me think he's just not going to be on the ticket.
Yeah,
You
he
know.
needs new batteries.
Well, I don't think they're going to bother with new batteries. I think they're gonna say your batteries have been removed. Go sit in the White House and shut up while
Yeah.
we go win the election with someone else, which won't be Kamala either, because she's total moron actually. So
Yeah, her batteries are fine, but the wiring in the toy is screwed up.
yeah, yeah, she got some cheap components up there, and
Yeah, Chinese, no doubt.
exactly. Um, and so I just think that's where that's headed. You know what? Let's take this one story first because it's kind of relates to what we just talked about. Because I mean, there's a bunch of Democrats pretending like everything's fine, which means it's not. And the news media is increasingly finding it difficult to cover for Biden, which means at some point they won't. Or someone will give them permission to not cover for him anymore, which means it's over. Um, and then he will just be another guy that they found a way to cast onto the trash heap and move on. They'll
Hmm.
they'll LBJ him,
Yeah.
whether he wants to or not. He's going to be history. And there's a lot of stuff going on in DC, but I just saw the headline that RFK Jr. is weighing a libertarian run for president, which is interesting.
Well, that would be a new low point for the Libertarian Party.
Yeah, although I think the Libertarian Party, since they're always at a low point, would consider this actually a
Running a
positive.
Democrat. Running a Democrat named Kennedy.
Well, they might.
Liberty.
Liberty, yeah, liberty on two issues and no liberty on everything else. But we've got a big name, and then they may try to run people for other positions as a result. But
Wow.
the reason why he's doing this is because he's finding it very difficult to qualify for the ballot
Right.
in a
As an
whole
independent.
range of in a whole range of states, because the Libertarian Party would already have ballot access in many states, but being a candidate that has no party affiliation.
Didn't they already choose? Haven't they already chosen their candidate or not yet?
No, 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 and they won't for a while. So the National Committee Chair for the Libertarian Party, Angela McArdle, has said that the party and Kennedy are having a lot of, quote, good conversations on good terms, unquote. I respect his decision to want to go independent, but libertarians really admire the strong position against mandates and lockdowns, so we're going to stay on friendly terms and see what happens.
Wow.
It sounds like they're trying to discuss some of these other issues, which I don't know, what his real positions are on anything beyond, I think when they went through and they reviewed what his positions were, they all sounded pretty solid, rock solid, liberal to progressive Democrat, except
Oh yeah.
on, I think maybe he was a bit more in favor of the Second Amendment, maybe. And that he was against mandates and lockdowns, and then which, like, I don't even know if Joe Biden is for those things anymore, so it's not exactly earth shattering.
Well, Joe Biden doesn't know either. So
Yeah,
till,
Joe Biden.
till
Joe
someone
Biden.
told Joe what to think on that, he's not thinking about it. He's thinking about ice cream.
It's like asking my cat what my cat thinks about it.
Mm-hmm.
My cat's not thinking about it.
Yeah.
So, and but I think that the issue is that he's now looking for a way to get on the ballot.
And of
And
course, the Libertarian Party would go, "Hey, we can get some new members."
yeah, yeah, that's pretty much what it would be an opportunity. Now, I don't know what effect it would have on the presidential race because it really depends on, since these protest candidacies largely just steal votes from one of the two major candidates, then it's only a question of how much they steal from which candidate in which states, because the states, with a couple of exceptions, are winner take all electoral college wise. And the electoral college, if you finish a strong third, you get, in all but two states, you get like 0 electoral votes. But if you take enough votes from one candidate or the other, you can throw that state
Yeah.
to one candidate or the other, perhaps one that if there was no third candidate, the majority would go to a different candidate than when that third party is in. So that's really what it comes down to, and that's a state by state thing.
Yeah. Has a Libertarian candidate ever won an electoral vote?
No,
So
no, actually,
the best that they can do is swing the electoral outcome within a state.
so the last third party candidate to even get a significant percentage of the national vote in any way was Ross Perot, and I think he got like 17% or something.
Right.
Which at the time, and ever since, most of the analysis I've heard said that pretty much helped Bill Clinton, who did not get a majority of the vote, to win.
Yeah.
Because it mostly came out of the incumbent president, George H.W. Bush's votes, tied back to his no new taxes pledge and
Read my lips.
yeah. So, but having said that,
That was back when that was apparently a long time ago in American history, Kevin, because that's back when people cared about lower taxes enough to not vote for somebody because they reneged on a promise not to raise taxes. That somehow seems to be lost on the electorate now.
It is. The byproduct of it was Bill Clinton, who tried to raise taxes, but then actually, after 2 years of him and 2 years of Hillary's universal health care program, and they ended up having the first time in 40 years that the Republicans took over the House of Representatives. And then the rest of the Clinton presidency actually wasn't about raising taxes because they couldn't. And was actually about a balanced budget, which they did end up having.
It was the last time we had a balanced or a surplus in the federal government budget for 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which,
Actually confiscated more taxes than they spent, which has never happened since.
it's kind of a three bank shot to say that Ross Perot led to that all. But at the same time, I also think that we're not in the same media environment that we were then.
Yeah.
And we also are not in the same fiscal situation. We've actually accumulated more debt just during the Biden administration than the combination of like the previous two presidents. And it's only been 3.5 years or 3 years that he's been in. So it's really hard to say where this is going to lead. I think actually things are unlike the Clinton times where there was largely peace and prosperity. There was a booming economy with high tech. There was a peace dividend from the Cold War that had ended. And yet there was nobody on the world stage that was a rival to the United States. So that couldn't be more different from what's happening now. Everything is going to hell in a handbasket internationally, which is actually the next topic I wanted to bring up here, which is
Oh yeah, I forgot to ask you at the beginning of the show. Are we at war with anybody other than Russia via Ukraine yet?
Well, I think there's a bunch of people who are at war with us, and unfortunately, we think we have the option to do nothing if our troops are being hit by drones and killed. Uh, troops have actually been U.S. troops have been attacked 150 times in the last 2 months, I think, and largely without response. And then every once in a while, there's sort of this response which doesn't particularly do anything, and it's convinced the people who are doing this stuff, which are mostly backed by Iran, their proxies like the Houthis and Hezbollah, uh, that they are going to do whatever they want to do. Apparently, Iran has decided that we're at war. They're threatening us with war or nuclear war or whatever. And because of what's happened so far, they're pretty convinced that Joe Biden is going to back down and let them do whatever they want, which is actually how you end up with a war. Because at some point, they push you far enough. They say, "Well, we only killed 3. So what happens when we kill 30 or 300 or 3,000? When do you start taking strident action, or do you?" So Joe Biden has actually decided that the fatal drone strike on U.S. troops that were, I believe, is somewhere in the southern part of Iraq near the Jordanian border, that he's not going to respond, or he doesn't think it requires a response that goes after the source of the attack and ends it. So what it means is they're going to do it again, and they're going to raise the stakes. And it's not just there, because there's like 10 other places that this is going on. I mean, there's a bunch of people who with Iranian weapons that are living in tents in Yemen,
In
who are
Texas,
shutting down the Red Sea and the Horn of Africa from most international shipping.
right?
That's amazing. It's like the busiest channel in the world.
Yeah. Well, I think it's no secret that both Democrats and Republicans in D.C. want a war with Iran.
Well, they're going to
Or
get it by the way they're managing it, don't you think? At this point,
well, I think they're going to get it because that's what they want, and they can make it happen. That's what I think the deal is, regardless of how we get there. I mean, war is good for everyone's pockets, except ours, of course, which get rated for the military industrial complex, if you want to call it that. But it's amazing. I mean, it's as far as a drone strike on 3 of our soldiers, yeah, we should have immediately wherever that drone came from. If we can't figure out where that drone came from, just a general area, probably should have leveled it, called
yeah.
it good. Called it good, and and I think that's the perfectly good response. But I think what they're going to do here is they're going to wait for the overwhelming. Okay, it's time to move in the whole enchilada now, and have a nice formal war with Iran, and which will cost us another $1 trillion, if not more.
So I have one word that says the difference between now and 4 years ago. 3 words, actually. General Qasem Soleimani. He was a general in the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, which is sort of their high-end military guys who are out working all these different groups that were doing stuff to kill Americans and to advance all these little proxy wars everywhere. And they just figured out where he was driving down the road somewhere, I think in Iraq. Thought he was invulnerable, and Trump ordered a drone strike on his vehicle and just obliterated him. And the Iranians made a lot of noises and said they were going to do something. They fired some symbolic missiles, which didn't do much. And then after that, they got the message. They didn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And all these other proxy groups kind of squirmed back into their hole We also had cut off all the funding. Like, we're literally funding both sides of a potential war right now by funding not only our side and our allies and our military, but then we made the Iranians rich so they can do all this stuff. And Biden doesn't want to upset the Iranians by cutting them off from all this money. So when you talk about moving towards a war, if you do the opposite of what Trump did, and then you, on all accounts, which has been the modus operandi of the Democrats, you probably do get a war.
Yeah.
Don't you?
Well, you do. And there's probably no reason to not immediately retaliate against Americans or American soldiers, both being killed anywhere over there. I mean, there's 2 carrier strike groups in the area with the range and the firepower to probably destroy all of the Arab-speaking countries within a matter of 24 hours, probably.
Well, they could certainly finish off all the most of the Iranian military that's above ground.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. I mean, if they're gonna do that, I'm okay with that. What I'm not okay with is escalating this to a point where we have, we remove even more assets over there, and we put our troops down on the ground to be shot at by everyone over there. Essentially hates Americans, even the Saudi Arabians. They hate Americans. They back that whole 9/11 thing. They only like us because we buy oil. That's what I'm against, and that's what I think it seems like everybody in DC wants to go there. Republicans, they're screaming for war, and Democrats are, of course, warmongers by virtue of being Democrats. And it just doesn't make any sense for me. I don't think we've done any good in the Middle East.
No, and if we're not going to protect, if we're not going to do force protection on our own troops, then they shouldn't be there.
Right.
And if you do force protection by completely obliterating whoever decided that for the very first time they were going to even throw a grenade at your guys.
Right.
And that's what Trump did, and that's why we didn't have wars. And I found it hilarious that the media they tried to call him a warmonger, but he stopped all potential stuff like that from happening. It just didn't happen. And now everything, deterrence, which is the way you prevent yourself from having to fight all these wars. You have peace through deterrence. And apparently that's broken down everywhere. So now everybody's trying everything. And they know that there's a guy in the White House who can't even piece string 3 or 4 words together. So they know he's not the guy actually making any of these decisions.
You can't even say Iran.
They can't. And maybe we're saved from some blunders that Biden would actually be for if he was cognitively there. But now they don't believe that whoever's running Biden actually is in charge at this point.
No, and that's a scary thought, because whoever is in fact in charge, could get us into that war. And the fact of the matter is, Bobby asked the question, or brought up the point that often wartime presidents don't lose re-election. Right?
No, that's true. This is a potential re-election strategy for somebody who is otherwise totally unsuitable to even serve another day in office. But
right,
they can say, "How dare you question this?" I do.
So
think
if he did do the right response and obliterate wherever that drone came from or the area surrounding it, which would, as you pointed out, Kevin, which would, the Iranians would go, okay, well, maybe we shouldn't do that. So if he did do that, then he wouldn't be able to escalate it into an all-out war.
Yeah, they're escalating it through weakness and half measures, and that's how you end up in a real war. And if you look at past World War I in particular,
that's what they want. That's what they want. They want a war. I mean, shit. If you look at everybody's Twitter account, man, they're like war with Iran, war with Iran. All these people that would pay $174,000 a year to supposedly govern the country.
Yeah, I don't think we need a war to put an end to this.
No, we got a southern border that could use a little bit of love from about 35,000 troops.
Yeah.
Or 70,000 troops. So you can.
Well, apparently that's not a national security issue. Blinken, who is he's beginning to sound a lot like the Jimmy Carter era of foreign policy leadership, where they just say there's a malaise, or there's just, in other words, these are the people actually in charge of this that are supposed to be responsible for what's happening and preventing a war from occurring. He's out there saying that the Middle East is at its most dangerous since at least 1973, and arguably even before the Arab-Israeli War. And I don't see anything that he's doing that's going to actually prevent that. In fact, I actually think that they're missing the opportunity for the ounce of prevention. They're going to let it escalate till it gets so bad that it needs a pound of cure, and then you'll have a real war.
Yeah. I think that's I think that's their foreign policy.
So on the southern border, what we've got now is a deal that's being floated in Congress, which actually has not gone very well for some of the people that are floating it. There's a bipartisan deal in the Senate, and the Speaker, Mike Johnson, has said that he says the deal's not enough to secure the border. That's what he said. And that's how people feel in the House of Representatives. So therefore, I don't think that's going to go anywhere. And he's not going to let it come to a vote. And they're trying to claim that he's doing it to help Trump, but he doesn't need to do it because it's actually kind of a bad idea based on everything.
If you're not going to close the border, then it's not a good. I mean, if you're going to have a bill to close the border, and it doesn't close the border, then yeah, that's a bad bill.
Well, it's
really not that difficult.
No, it's statutorily enshrining the ability to have 5,000 illegal crossings per day for a week threshold to shut down the border. But then there's no sign that Biden, who could do this without any bill being passed from Congress, that his administration is going to do this at all. And so,
well, the White House makes border protection policy, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that correct?
With this, just his pen, he was able to sign, I think, some 50 executive orders. The first one of which reversed the policy that the Trump administration has successfully put in place that was working, which was the Remain in Mexico policy. He has tried at every instance under his own power to reverse all the policies that were working. All he has to do is unreverse them, and he won't do it. So why does Congress need to go past something that, in the end, the person who has to execute all this seems to have no interest in anyway?
Yeah. The executive branch is not executing anything that secures the border. That's for sure. And it's I don't know, crisis is the right word. It's a crime, more like it, as far as I'm concerned. A criminal negligence from the executive branch of the United States of America, allowing all these people unfettered access into the country and making it easy for them to both get here and then be here. Changing our culture, changing our demographic, changing, everything about our society. It's criminal.
Yeah. And the fact that there is actually an active impeachment inquiry against the person who is supposed to be the primary enforcer of the border, which is the Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas. That guy he thinks the border is secure. That's how delusional.
It's been secured by the cartels, the drug smugglers and human traffickers. Definitely been secured by them.
It's secure for drug traffickers. It's secure for human smugglers. It's secure for anybody who wants to come across. It's even secure for terrorists because they're going to be gotaways. They're not trying to get caught, right? And so.
Yeah, they don't need the new tennis shoes, the telephone, and the money from the government, and a plane ticket to wherever they want to go in the United States. They don't need that. They're here for a specific purpose.
Yeah, no, that's pretty much the case. And there is a condemnation also of one of the Republicans who's been working on the bipartisan border plan. It's James Lankford of Oklahoma. And there's a really strange feature in this about illegal immigrants being able to claim a child care tax credit. In other words, they just show up and they get a tax
credit against what taxes?
None. That's just it. And this is Representative Scott Perry, Republican from Pennsylvania, who's formerly the head of the House Freedom Caucus, said that's absolutely something that should be a red line for every single Republican. There should be no one Republican willing to vote for that. And that's in this bill. So in the effort to compromise, where the Democrats really aren't doing anything other than trying to put window dressing on what they're going to do to survive politically in 2024, they get cover out of this, is what they get. The Democrats get cover. We don't get a closed border, and we get like $1 gazillion in child care tax credits going to people who just ran across the border and never paid any taxes.
Right.
That's unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. And again, all I can say is it's criminal. The whole enterprise is just probably one of the biggest criminal enterprises in America. I would imagine the drug cartels are probably first, but followed probably closely by human traffickers. And then we have the United States government and its repopulation strategy.
Well, and then also the United States government's plan to make energy unaffordable. There's this brilliant move by the Biden administration that they've actually proposed. It's a serious proposal. I thought it was like a Babylon Bee thing. They plan to pause permits for liquefied natural gas export. So they want to make it so that you're not allowed to export any of it, which will drive up global prices. They'll essentially create and they're not doing it, by the way, to make sure that there's enough liquefied natural gas for us domestically. We've got plenty of it. They say they're doing it because they want to save the planet from climate change. I know.
We're going to force other countries to freeze to death in January so that the Earth can... Well, we all know the Earth doesn't change with the burning of hydrocarbon fuels.
No, they'll accomplish absolutely nothing with it. That's the only guarantee, is that all this will do. Well, they will accomplish one thing. One person on the editorial board of the Washington Post, the Washington Compost, which isn't exactly a Republican rag. It is a Democrat mouthpiece, but the editorial board actually called this pause an election year sop to climate activists. So that's more important than the supply of energy globally and the ability to satisfy that and keep prices low. They're more interested in making sure that they make climate activists happy.
Yeah, the whole climate scam, I don't know if we ever talked about. Did you ever read Jeff Reynolds' story? It just came out here a few days ago.
No, I didn't see it.
It's a deep dive on climate change. And really a fundamental dive on it. It's at I forget the name of the outfit that he works for. Restoring the America. I don't know what it is. I'll have to find it and post it, but he goes into great detail about this whole thing is just the supposed science is so flawed that to give it any political or policy consideration is the fool's errand of the century. There is no confirmed science to indicate that anything that we do has the slightest effect on the climate. And here we are denying. Here we are, the United States of America, with a huge, abundant supply of the cheapest natural gas in the entire world, and we are going to stop exporting it to countries who will pay way more than it cost us to produce it and ship it, because we're going to save the planet. That is just. I have
Yeah.
no words.
Last I checked, too, some of these countries that need it are the ones that have been, say, under attack and stuff by like Russia, um, or at least having their energy supplies cut off, like in Western Europe. They were finally happy to receive American liquefied natural gas exports, and he's saying we're not going to
Oh,
allow it.
yeah, and we have so much we burn it.
That's right. Until we found a way to export it, we used to just burn it.
Yeah. So now that we're not exporting it, what are we going to be doing with it? We're going to be burning it again.
Because it used to be just a byproduct of going in and getting what do you call it? Petroleum out of the ground.
Well,
It used to be just released from that. And we finally turned it. And by the way, it was the chief reason why, if all someone cared about was reducing CO2 emissions, and that's the big irony here. If all they cared about was that, the number one way that's taken place, the biggest achiever on that metric on the planet has been the United States, and it's been entirely due to switching from higher carbon emission fossil fuels to natural gas, which is much lower, not by switching to solar and wind, which doesn't even compose a tiny percentage of our our energy grid. In fact, it will not compose a significant percentage of our energy grid anytime soon. Only nuclear can do that.
right.
And we talked about that yesterday with Representative Ed Deal, but we're still pretty far from that becoming a reality. Plus, we'll probably have to fight the same environmental wackos that will claim that nuclear is too dangerous, even though modern nuclear is so super safe that it can't melt down. So
France makes 70% of their energy with nuclears. And when's the last time you heard of a nuclear accident in France? I don't remember one ever.
No,
it's safe, but you're right. Our grid will the only way our grid can run on solar, and it can run on windmills. But the only way for that to happen is our society will have to return to 19th century technology.
Yeah, or we'll have to return to having no technology, which is what I think you're saying, because basically,
exactly what I'm saying.
yeah. I mean, you decide if you get rid of civilization, I guess you don't need energy, and that's what they
you don't. If you get rid of progress, if you get rid of innovation, if you get rid of most economic activity, then yes, you need far less energy.
And my answer to those people is you first.
Yeah.
You first.
Yeah. Let's see you render tallow for candles for light. Let's see you go to town on a horse.
Let's see you stay warm when it's 15 degrees out.
And let's see you chop all of the firewood that takes to stay warm at 15 degrees. And
which you won't be allowed because you can't cut down the trees anyway.
Right. And let's say you grow all of your own food and then have time to go do whatever the hell it is you think you want to do, because that takes all your time. That's the dividend for technology and for an advancing society, is we don't have to do that. We don't have to spend all day just securing our sustenance. We used to have to do.
Yeah, it's the same people that say that that there's too much population in the world and we need less people, and I'm like, good. Depopulate yourself first, and then the rest of us
make an example that we can follow.
That's right. We'll laud you as heroes for having.
We will. Hell, we'll erect a statue.
That's right.
If the climate church really took this seriously, like the Hale-Bopp comet cult did, then they would do the same as the Hale-Bopp comet people.
Yeah. Go out in the desert or out into the wilderness, find some empty place, go live there, totally rough it, and then we'll see how many of you enjoy camping forever
Yeah,
with
we'll
no
see. How,
modern conveniences. And
let's see how many of you make it out of there a champion for liberty and freedom.
yeah,
And
right, that's
free
right.
enterprise and progress and advancement and innovation and
So this LNG export pause, they call it, which pauses are just like you know 15 days to stop the spread. A pause is going to be a ban.
yeah.
And the irony of this, and the reason why the Washington Compost editorial board was attacking it, was because actually, when you force other countries to not be able to rely upon liquefied natural gas, then they just go and start using coal instead. So you're actually going to produce more CO2 emissions as
Mhm.
a virtue signaling effort to save the climate. You're actually going to make it worse. It's
Yeah,
completely stupid.
yeah. Well, last
And
winter we saw, as Europe was getting hit with higher natural gas prices, and it would have been a great time for us to really ramp up our LNG exports to Europe. They started cutting down the forests.
yeah, they
Big,
did.
they did big firewood push. I mean, you got to freaking stay warm. I'm gonna stay warm.
Well, and I
Government's
know
not gonna force me to be cold.
they say global warming is going to kill everyone, but any decent amount of global cooling is by far more deadly, especially
Oh
throughout
yeah,
human history.
yeah. And there doesn't seem to be any conclusive evidence that the Earth is in fact warming.
Yeah, there's definitely a dubious nature to that evidence. And when forced to prove that these measures that they do by fiat will actually produce the result they said, in this case, it's provable that it will do the opposite. So they are
Yeah,
under no burden to prove that it will actually make any. But the only thing that they can guarantee will happen is that they will cause things like electrical rates to go up. And here's what's happening in Oregon.
yeah, no kidding.
Pacific Power just announced a 12.8% rate hike starting January 1st. So it's already basically happened.
Great.
Umatilla Electric Cooperative announced a 3.9% hike that started last October. Uh, there are, yesterday we discussed a rate hike. I believe is taking place in the Portland metro area through PGE is somewhere on the order of 18%.
Yeah.
And so these rate hikes, no one's ability to afford those rate hikes is going up at that rate of increase.
Right. No, no, not at all. Not at all. And so you have to figure out less expensive ways to, if you're using electricity, one thing you have to do is less expensive ways to heat your house, and natural gas is it. And here we are trying to ban natural gas into new construction, and probably you can't do any, natural gas infrastructure, without jumping through a bunch of hoops. And it's just, I'll tell you what, it's a return. It is a return to the 19th century. That's what Democrats really want. They want us horse and buggy, you know, cooking our beans and rice on a wood stove.
Well, shifting gears, part of the reason why we don't have elected officials working on the right things or reflecting smart policies is because they're actually busy uh, milking the system for their own benefit. And Democrat Cori Bush, who's, I believe she's part of the squad in Congress, confirmed that she's being investigated by the Department of Justice because her campaign was spending money on security, and the security payments, and she's somebody who's been for defunding the police. The security payments are actually going to a former security guard that she was married to, or that she did marry. And so now they're examining where all this money went, what it was being spent on. And of course, you're not supposed to be able to take campaign money and just spend it on living a lavish lifestyle by paying somebody that's working for you, then turn around and say, I don't know, treat you or subsidize your living expenses. But she spent nearly $130,000 on private security last year,
Wow.
which is only including the first 3 quarters of 2023.
Wow.
And so she's facing an investigation, and it's ironic because she said she needs the private security because she feels threatened, but she's also supported having police be defunded, which means that she couldn't count on public security to show up.
Right. Right. Man, their hypocrisy knows no bounds, does it?
It doesn't, and if they feel like they can get away with it, they'll keep doing it. Now, it is interesting the DOJ is investigating this, but then there's some other news that came out last week that's very interesting. So we have a candidate here in Oregon who's running as a Republican for the 4th Congressional District. Her name is Monique Despain, and she held a press conference last week where she called out the current incumbent Congresswoman, Val Hoyle, for her illicit dealings with LaMota, which we've talked about here. It's a pot producer who was essentially one of the top donors to Democrats in the state in recent years, usually in the form of bags of cash. And it's on the record for anybody who wants to go see this in detail, exactly what she did, what she said, when she said it, and how it led to her receiving a $5,800 donation, believed to be all in cash, which already broke FEC rules because you can only take $100 in cash as a donation for Congress, for federal office.
Oh, really? Didn't know that.
And you have to return it promptly to the donor, which never happened. And they donated it to charity later once the heat came on. But this donation, long before all that was handled, influenced Val Hoyle to take the lead role in actively steering a $554,000 grant in the direction of a nonprofit started just 2 weeks before the grant was issued to a nonprofit run by LaMota called Endeavor. It funded 4 positions, one of which was a $97,000 a year position of executive director of the nonprofit.
Wow.
And all of this stuff that took place is spelled out chapter and verse in this Epoch Times article that covers all the details of what happened. And the primary candidate, Monique Despain, presented this, put forward a website called whatsvalhiding.com, which took all the reporting that exists from all of the different sources, mostly Sophie Peel at Willamette Week, as well as Jeff Eager from Oregon Roundup, and some others, and laid it out in chronological order and presented it. And then she said, when you look at all of this, this is probable cause for conducting a federal investigation. There is a federal investigation of LaMota right now. There's a federal investigation that also encompasses Shamia Fagan, who dealt with LaMota and did favors for LaMota in return for the largesse that she enjoyed from LaMota. And Val Hoyle, this timeline shows that there's a lot of probable cause here. And so Monique Despain said, why don't you extend the investigation and include Val Hoyle in this, who's a sitting congresswoman? And I find it interesting. We just talked about Cori Bush, who is being investigated by the DOJ. And now we've got Val Hoyle, who isn't yet being investigated, but that's exactly what Monique Despain called upon Hoyle to do.
Yeah. I got to go dark here for a second, but I'm still here. You know, it's amazing to me that there hasn't been more investigation. I mean, this LaMota thing, you know, obviously Val Hoyle was, a huge part of that. And she was apparently getting sufficient kickbacks, if you will, to route $554,000, to a newly formed nonprofit by the owner of LaMota. But I mean, Shamia Fagan obviously as well, she's being investigated. But Tina Kotek took huge amounts of cash.
She did, yeah.
A dozen or two other either elected officials or candidates within Oregon that also took that. I mean, they should be all over this stuff. I don't understand what the Justice Department does anymore if they're not going to investigate crime and or the at least appearance of crime, and determine whether or not there has been a crime committed. I mean, if they're not going to do that, what exactly are they doing? Prosecuting political opponents?
They have been doing that. They have a lot of time and apparently resources to do that.
Yeah, I mean that. There we are. We're just one step away from exporting bananas.
Yeah, because we aren't going to be exporting LNG, and we are actually, as you said, very close to this banana republic stage. But this is a serious matter because this is the person who's actually serving in Congress right now and voting on things and making decisions. All the stuff that we just talked about.
Yeah.
About war and peace, Congress's role for oversight on that, the border, energy policy, and what's being decided and done on our behalf by the federal government, all this stuff. And the person who's supposed to be representing the 4th District of Oregon, this is what's going on with her.
Yeah.
So it's time for people to start tuning in and paying attention and figure out how to get involved in these races, because it's not going to happen by itself. Just because we made it sound like this is almost a slam dunk, we know that extricating Democrats from a seat that has been held by Democrats, by the way, for 50 years,
Yeah.
is not going to be easy. It is probably the best chance that has existed in all those years for this to happen. But it's not going to happen while we sit there and spectate. People have to go and actually decide, are they going to donate? Are they going to volunteer? Are they eventually going to take yard signs? They're going to tell their friends. If that stuff doesn't happen, if we all just say, I'm sure it'll fix itself, then you know what I can be sure of in a state like Oregon, where we lose close elections, it won't fix itself.
No, it won't.
Fixes in.
It won't fix itself. And 90% of the people who will vote in that CD4 election right now probably haven't heard of any of this crap either.
Which is why we need to tell everybody.
Exactly why we need to talk about it and tell everybody, because the media is not going to do their job on that.
Meanwhile, the Democrats are lining up all of the things that they need to do in order to, they believe, give themselves the best chance to take back the 5th congressional district seat from Lori Chavez Dreamer, which was won for the first time by a Republican since the 90s.
Yeah.
And so that was, not 50 years, but more in the order of 25 years. And they've decided the DCCC, which is the entity that frankly takes the predominant role in deciding who's going to probably win a primary in races around the country for Democrats, have decided that Jamie McLeod Skinner, who is the multi-time loser, who lost narrowly in 2022 to Lori Chavez Dreamer, is no longer wanted. They've decided they want Janelle Bynum, who's a state representative who's running for that position. And they have decided to name Bynum as to their, what they call their competitive red to blue program, where they convert red Republican seats to blue Democrat seats. And they aren't waiting for the general election for the people of the 5th district to decide. They're putting their finger on the scale right now. So is Emily's List, which is has decided to throw their weight behind Janelle Bynum as well. So this is a seat that, by the way, if you look at the number of seats that we have in the House of Representatives, these two seats, the 4th district and the 5th district, easily could have a measurable and demonstrable effect on whether or not any of these things we keep talking about, border legislation, investigations into Mayorkas, to Biden, all of that, whether any of that happens, even with a Republican president, none of it happens.
Yeah. Yep, I agree. I had a thought on that, and I took a drink of water, and everything got washed out of my mind.
Well, Hakeem Jeffries would become the Speaker of the House, and if you know anything about Hakeem Jeffries, he's no Nancy Pelosi, because he makes Nancy Pelosi look like a moderate, reasonable person.
Yeah. Well, the Democrats have been steadily, moving their seats and their positions to the left, far left. I mean, Kotek was left of Brown. Brown was left of the doctor. I forget his name. You know,
Oh yeah, Doc Kitzhaber.
Kitzhaber. Yeah, I don't know how I could forget that. He served 3 or 4 terms, or 3 and a part of a term. And they're moving everyone to the left, as they replace their chess pieces. And I don't really know how far left. Well, I guess I do now. Apparently, creepy Uncle Jamie Skinner is not far enough to the left, and Bynum is.
Well, and Janelle Bynum is African American, which fits with the identity politics. Plus, they're dumping a loser
Okay.
is what they're doing, because Janelle Bynum actually did beat Lori Chavez Dreamer twice for state representative at a lower level race.
Smart.
Yep. So, the Democrats, while we're all sitting here thinking, well, everybody's got to see how bad it is. Well, they won't. And if you think, well, once they see how bad it is, they'll vote the right way and everything will be fine. Not necessarily.
No.
And
not unless you explain it to them.
Not unless you explain it to them, and then you fight for the candidates that could defeat their candidates. It's that simple. Now, there is one great development that came up. State Representative, let's see here, Scharf, Republican, here in Oregon, has proposed removing the I for that indicates incumbency for judges that are on the ballot, that usually get a 15 to 20 point boost when they run for election. Because they have an I next to their name, people just say, well, that person's fine, we'll just keep them, even if they don't know who they are.
Right. And they don't.
So she's saying we could lay out all the credentials equally. I don't know if this bill is going to go anywhere, because it's kind of it's worked for the Democrats. Most people, when they run for election, when they serve as a judge, they step down before the end of their term. They have a replacement who serves very little time in office that is appointed by the governor. And most positions in the judiciary are not elected in open, equal, and fair elections. They're elected. They run for election after achieving this incumbency status, even for a short period of time.
Sure.
So about 70% or 80% of all positions, I believe, are appointed by the governor. And so this could change that. It would be great if it did. But here's one last note that's reassuring that I think as we wrap up here. Government can't do anything right. And twice in the last 2 days, they apparently mailed residents' tax info relating to what's called the 1099-G. They've mailed it to the wrong people. So they've mailed thousands of residents here in Oregon, someone else's, apparently 33,000 within the last week, have received the wrong form. They've received somebody else's form. And by the way, on these forms are personal information. So these people that are simply trying to collect money from you apparently can have no limits to how much they can screw up.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Well, incompetence at every level in Oregon. It's been that way for so many years, and nobody seems to care or take notice. It's weird. Lori said, I swear they draw up bills to use as negotiating tools, and they absolutely do, Lori. I call them ransom bills. They will draw up ransom bills that they will use to blackmail Republicans into voting for tax increases, because you still need a couple of Republican votes to increase taxes in the state of Oregon. But yeah, they do that.
And then when they collect your taxes, they mail the wrong tax forms to people.
Yeah. God.
I guarantee you no one will be fired because of this. That's my prediction.
No, hell no. You can't fire a public employee. What are you thinking, Kevin?
I know. Well, on that note, we have run the gamut here, and now everybody knows what to do. Get out there and tell people. And by the way, share this show, because we just reported all the stuff that people don't know.
Everywhere in CD4.
That's right, especially in CD4. Do let people in CD5 know too. We've got to work hard. We've got to get rolling here. We can't sit around on our hands and hope everything just works out. Get out and push. Let's get there. Thank you for joining me here tonight, David.
Thank you, Kevin. It was fun. Thank you, everybody, for your great comments and for joining us.
Have a great night, and we'll see you tomorrow night on the next episode of The Captive Audience. Should be